Growing up on a farm west of the Mississippi was an adventure like no other. My brother and I spent our childhood in a world of tall cornfields, rolling hills, and endless sky. The farm was massive, with thousands of acres dedicated mostly to growing corn. When the corn reached its peak, the fields looked endless, like a vast green ocean swaying gently in the breeze. Every summer, the sun beat down relentlessly, casting a golden glow over the rows of corn, while the sweet smell of earth surrounded us. It was a world filled with possibility, yet also a place where strange things seemed to happen. On days when we weren't busy with chores, my brother and I felt the pull of adventure, and we often found ourselves exploring the rustling stalks of corn that stretched high above us. The cornfield jungle. The cornfields were our playground, and we spent hours wandering through them. The tall stalks swayed gently in the wind, creating a whispering sound that felt like nature's own voice. Most of the time, we stayed close to the house, but on occasion, we ventured deep into the heart of the cornfield. Each time we did, it felt like stepping into a giant green jungle, a world entirely separate from the one we knew. There was something magical about the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground. Every corner we turned, we discovered something new: an old tire swing hanging from a sturdy tree, a family of rabbits darting through the underbrush, or even a hidden spot where wildflowers grew in vibrant colors. Those days were filled with laughter and wonder, and the memories of our adventures are some of the best of my childhood. A quest for the creek. One summer afternoon, as the sun hung high in the sky, we decided it was time for another adventure. This time, our goal was to find a creek that flowed along the far edge of our farm. It was a place we rarely visited because it was quite a trek from the house. We had only been there a few times before, but the cool, refreshing water made the long walk worthwhile, especially on those hot summer days when the sun beat down mercilessly. With excitement bubbling in our hearts, we set off, our voices ringing out as we chatted and laughed, the sound of our joy blending with the rustling of the corn around us. We dashed through the rows, weaving in and out of the towering stalks, feeling like explorers on a grand expedition. We were determined to reach the creek and enjoy the sweet relief of its cool water. As we walked deeper into the cornfields, the air grew thick with the smell of soil and growing plants. The sunlight danced across the leaves, creating a patchwork of light and shadow. With each step, the sound of the corn swaying grew louder, almost like a gentle roar that surrounded us. It felt alive, as if the corn itself was whispering secrets to us. The mysterious clearing. After a while, we finally stepped out of the dense corn and into a clearing. The open space was about 40 or 50 feet wide and surrounded by tall corn on all sides. It felt strange to find a clearing like this in the middle of a cornfield. We had never seen anything like it before. The ground was bare, a perfect circle of dirt, and it seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The sight made my heart race. My brother and I exchanged glances, both of us sensing that something was off. It was hard to shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something we weren't meant to see. Clearing our heads, we slowly walked closer to the edge of the clearing, curiosity pulling us forward. As we stood there, taking in our surroundings, something caught my eye. A group of men stood in the center of the clearing. There were about 10 of them, and they all stopped what they were doing the moment they saw us. The air went still, and the moment felt heavy with tension. They stared at us, their expressions a mix of shock and worry, as if we had caught them doing something they shouldn't have. A strange group of men. In the few seconds that my brother and I stood frozen in shock, I began to notice some details about the men. They were all white and appeared to be in their 40s or 50s. Their clothes looked too neat for farm work, button-up shirts, slacks, and polished shoes. They seemed more like office workers than farmers, and it puzzled me why they would be in the middle of our cornfield. As I took in the scene, I saw several large pieces of electronic equipment set up on the cleared dirt. The equipment looked bulky, like it could be folded up into big carrying cases, similar to band equipment ready for a concert. The setup gave the clearing an odd atmosphere, making it feel more like a makeshift workspace than a part of our farm. My heart raced as I scanned the faces of the men. They looked just as surprised as we were, and their eyes darted between us and each other. It felt as if they were caught in a secret they never intended to share. One of the men, tall and with graying hair, reached out his hand and took a step toward us, his face showing a mix of surprise and concern. I could see the tension in his posture, as if he was trying to decide whether to approach us or retreat. The decision to run. But my brother and I didn't stick around to find out what was happening. A surge of instinct kicked in, and we turned to run, sprinting back through the cornfields as fast as we could. The sound of our feet pounding against the dirt mixed with the rustling of the corn, creating a cacophony of noise. We ran without looking back, driven by an overwhelming sense of fear and confusion. We didn't say a word as we sprinted. Our minds were racing, processing the strange encounter we had just experienced. The images of the clearing and the men lingered in our thoughts, but there was no time to dwell on it. We felt a strong sense that something was very wrong, and we had no intention of sticking around to find out what it was. The familiar sight of our house finally came into view, and we dashed toward it, our hearts pounding in our chests. When we reached the porch, we collapsed onto the steps, gasping for breath. Our adrenaline slowly faded, replaced by a lingering fear that clung to us like a heavy blanket. The search for answers. When we got back to the house, we were desperate to tell our parents what had happened. But our mom was in town, and our dad was busy working on the farm. We exchanged nervous glances, both of us unsure of how to explain what we had seen. After waiting what felt like hours, my dad finally returned home. He looked at us with a raised eyebrow, noticing that we looked a little pale and shaken. "What's wrong, boys?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. We hesitated for a moment, trying to find the right words. My brother spoke first, his voice trembling. "We saw something strange in the cornfield, Dad. There were men in a clearing, and they were doing something odd." When we finally told him about the clearing and the men, his expression shifted. He promised to check it out the next morning, reassuring us that we did the right thing by telling him. A small sense of relief washed over us, knowing that he would investigate. As night fell, we tried to shake off the fear that had settled in our bones. We went to bed, but sleep was elusive. Our minds were filled with images of the clearing and the men. Who were they? What were they doing in our cornfield? The morning after. The next morning, I woke up early, my heart racing with anticipation and anxiety. I could hear my dad moving around in the kitchen, preparing for his day. My brother and I quickly got dressed, eager to see what he would find. After breakfast, we joined him as he set out to investigate the clearing. We followed him through the cornfields, the sun shining bright overhead. The air was filled with the sweet scent of corn and the sounds of birds chirping. As we approached the spot where we had encountered the men, my stomach twisted with nerves. Would we find them again? Or had we imagined it all? When we finally reached the clearing, my heart sank. There was nothing, no men, no equipment, nothing at all. The place looked just like it had before, a perfect circle of dirt surrounded by tall corn. My dad knelt down and examined the ground, looking for any signs of what might have happened. We searched the area thoroughly, but it was as if the men had never existed. My dad frowned, clearly puzzled by the lack of evidence. "You're sure you saw men here?" he asked, looking at us with concern. "Yes, Dad. There were 10 of them, and they looked like they were doing something important," I insisted, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion. My dad nodded, but his brow furrowed deeper. "I don't see any signs of a camp or anything unusual. It's strange, that's for sure. But I believe you." Lingering questions. We spent the rest of the day wandering the farm, but the questions lingered in our minds. Who were those men? What were they doing in our cornfield? My brother and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We replayed the encounter over and over in our heads, trying to piece together the mystery. As the days turned into weeks, the memory of that day began to fade, but it was never truly forgotten. We continued our explorations in the cornfields, but a sense of caution settled over us. The thrill of adventure was mixed with a lingering unease. I started to notice things I hadn't before, the way the corn seemed to rustle differently in the wind, or how shadows seemed to move just out of sight. The unseen presence. Sometimes, late in the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a strange presence in the fields. It was as if the corn held secrets, whispers of things we were never meant to know. My brother and I often exchanged nervous glances when we found ourselves alone in the fields, our laughter fading into silence as we felt the weight of something watching us. One evening, while we were playing hide and seek near the edge of the cornfield, I hid behind a tall stalk. As I crouched down, trying to catch my breath, I glanced around and caught a glimpse of something unusual. A shadow moved between the rows of corn, just out of my line of sight. My heart raced as I held my breath, straining to see what it was. But when I peeked again, there was nothing, just the quiet, still cornfield. "Are you okay?" my brother called out, his voice tinged with worry. "Yeah," I replied, but I didn't feel okay. The unease settled back in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Trusting my instincts. Through these experiences, I learned to trust my instincts. There are things in this world that we can't always explain, things that linger in the shadows, just beyond our understanding. Those moments reminded me to be cautious and aware of my surroundings. My childhood was filled with lessons, both beautiful and terrifying, that shaped who I became. As I grew older, the encounters from that summer stayed with me. I often found myself thinking back to the men in the clearing, their expressions filled with surprise and concern. It felt as though they were waiting for something, waiting for us to see them. Each time I recalled the moment, a shiver ran down my spine. The farm held many stories, but this one stood out. It was a reminder that the world can be filled with mystery, and sometimes the answers lie just beyond our reach. Embracing fear and curiosity. Looking back now, I realize that fear can reveal deeper truths about ourselves and the world around us. Those experiences taught me the importance of listening to my gut feelings. There is something powerful in embracing fear. It forces us to confront the unknown and to acknowledge the mysteries that life presents. As I navigated my teenage years, I found myself drawn to the stories of others. I became fascinated with tales of the unexplained, ghosts, myths, and legends. I sought out books that explored the supernatural, always hoping to find a connection between my own experiences and those of others. I wanted to understand what lay beyond the veil of our everyday lives. Through my curiosity, I learned to appreciate the beauty in the unknown. Every story holds a lesson, and the strange encounters of my childhood became a source of inspiration. They sparked my imagination and fueled my desire to explore the mysteries of life. A life shaped by experience. The experiences of my childhood continue to shape who I am today. They remind me that life is a delicate balance between fear and curiosity. As I navigate adulthood, I find myself drawn to new adventures, always searching for the next story to tell. And while I may never fully understand those encounters in the cornfield, they are a part of my journey, one that I'll carry with me forever. In the end, the farm became more than just a backdrop for my childhood. It was a place where I learned to embrace the unknown. I found strength in my fear and curiosity, and I learned to trust my instincts. The echoes of my past remind me that even in the most familiar places, there are mysteries waiting to be uncovered. As I share my story, I hope to inspire others to look beyond the surface of their own lives, to be curious, to question, and to explore the shadows that linger at the edges of our understanding. Each encounter shapes us in ways we may not fully grasp, but it's through these experiences that we find our place in the world. And so, I continue to embrace the mysteries of life, knowing that some questions may never be answered. The beauty lies not only in the stories we tell, but in the journeys we take to uncover them.